I'm Nura, welcome to my channel. Today I'm here with another analog photography video and I will be talking about how to decide the camera settings so that you get a perfectly exposed image. During last week's tahti tortu recipe video, I had mentioned that today I would be publishing another analog photography related video. And today I will try to help you answer some of the questions that you've been sending me regarding how to select the correct exposure settings in your camera. And some of the questions are like, I have 200 ISO film in my camera and the widest aperture setting is 2.8. I want to shoot at night, so how can I decide my exposure time? Or I have 800 ISO film in my camera and I'm going to be shooting at the beach. How should I decide my settings so that my images are not overexposed? Or I have been shooting street photos and they have turned out a little dark. So what settings should I change to make them lighter? All of these questions are actually related to the camera settings, and you have basically three settings in your camera, and I talked about this in a previous video, but today I will help you select the method on how to decide those. And those settings are the film ISO speed, which actually once you put the film in your camera you can't change, so that's one. And the other two you can manipulate in most cases are the aperture and the exposure time, or the shutter speed. And by manipulating it, what I mean is some cameras allow you to do that and some cameras don't. So like Lomography Fisheye 1 does not let you edit any of the settings. So it's just a point and shoot camera, and the only thing you can do is decide your film first and decide to use a flash or not. And that's one of the most basic cameras. And Lomography Sardina or the Fisheye 2 lets you select between a stable normal aperture setting, or well, it lets you select your shutter speed. You have N for a standard time, and then B, bulb long exposure, as long as you press the shutter, but it doesn't let you select the aperture. Sprocket Rocket Spinner or the Diana gives you the option to change the aperture as well. And then I have my Leica, which is a more free camera, I would like to call it, because I have a lot of settings here. So I can go between 1 second to 1,000 of a second to bulb, which is long exposure. And as far as the apertures go, right now I have the Minotaur on here, and I can select between f2.8 to f22. And it doesn't have a posometer or a light meter, so I need to decide those myself. And then there's my lovely LCA, which once I set the film speed here, so let's assume that I'm shooting with 200 ISO film, the camera actually decides the exposure time itself. And depending on whether I see one or two lights here, I know if it's gonna expose for a long time or not. And all of these are different options, and some SLR cameras or like the Leica M6 have light meters built into the camera, which shows you the settings that you can choose. And I don't have any cameras that do that other than the LCA, which is automatic, you could say. And if I'm shooting with this, then I need to know which settings to choose and how the balance of those will affect my photo. And one of the things you can do, the most analog thing you can do, is a do-it-yourself light meter. And I'll just show you how I put this together. I got this template from the Ilford website, and what I'm going to be doing is cutting out these three circles, and then I'll show you how I put it together. I finished cutting all the circles and now I'm gonna be putting it together. And I found this little wire that I'm gonna be putting through the middle here to keep all these three circles together. And I have my aperture, and then in the middle I have my ISO, and then in the back I have the bigger circle, which is the shutter speed. And basically I can select my film ISO and the light conditions that I'm in, and it's gonna give me the other two settings that actually match each other. So let's assume that I have 100 ISO film and I'm indoors. And once I select my ISO and the light conditions, it gives me the other settings, and I'm gonna check out to see aperture f4, and then it's gonna give me half a second of exposure time. And if I was using the same film but went out into the sun, then it would give me, I'm gonna check to see the f4 again for aperture, and now I have 1,000th of a second. So I just showed you how I put this together, but I'll go over it once again. As I said, I have my apertures top, film ISO in the middle, and exposure time or shutter speed in the back. And like I mentioned, one of the questions I received was if I am shooting with a 200 ISO film, and I'm shooting at night and the largest aperture I have is 2.8, then how should I set my shutter speed? And here you can see that it's it's like 1/8 of a second. So if I'm gonna shoot with 200 ISO at night with 2.8, then I can go with 1/8 of a second. Or if I was gonna use a smaller aperture, let's say 8, then it suggests I do 1 second. And if I was to shoot an 800 ISO film in bright sun, then I could go with like in my Leica, the smallest aperture is 22. So if I was to select that, then it's 500 of a second, which is quite fast. So basically, by sliding this, by first selecting my lightning conditions, and then selecting my film ISO from here, this gives me two settings to choose from. And the balance of those gives me a perfectly exposed image. So this is option number 1. Option number 2 is, of course, going out and buying a light meter. And a real light meter is basically device that is separate from your camera, which when you hold towards the object that you're going to be shooting, it gives you the settings that you can choose. And that's an option. And if you're into studio photography or portraiture, then I suggest you do that and go buy yourself a light meter, because that's the best option and that's going to give the best results. And like I said, this is the most analog and simple version, and that's the most advanced version. And in the middle is basically, we all have our smartphones nowadays. And I had mentioned this before, that I actually have an app on my smartphone that allows me or helps me decide these settings. And the app I'm using is Lux. But what you can do is in the App Store, you can search for light meter, and a bunch of different apps come up. And I selected Lux because it's it's a free app for one thing, and I had used a couple others and decided that Lux was answering my needs, so I went with that and deleted the others. And in Lux, what I do is I select my film speed, the ISO, first, and then I select my aperture as second. And up in the corner, then it suggests me the shutter speed that I need to select. So as I change the settings on the bottom, I see up top which other setting it suggests. So I usually go with first the aperture, and see what the exposure time is gonna be. And that really helped me. And after using it a little while, I realized that the results it was giving me are a little too bright. So sometimes if I'm under a lot of light, then I set it to one smaller aperture or one faster shutter speed to get more like moody images. But otherwise, like I said, it works for me, and you can either use that, or you can, like I said, search for light meter and select one of the other apps that comes up. It's totally up to you. But if you're unsure about which settings to choose in your camera, especially if you're a beginner, then I suggest you use one of these methods to help you along the way in getting perfectly exposed images and helping you learn the balance between those settings. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell button so you don't miss any of the other videos. And I will be uploading another video every Tuesday, so I hope to see you here. Bye!